I am super excited tonight to talk about NaNoWriMo. I know maybe that's weird for a publisher to talk about, but I think a lot of genius is built during the energy of NaNoWriMo. So we're not in any way affiliated with it, but it's a topic near and dear to my heart, and I'm excited to talk about it tonight. So I even feel like if you haven't started yet, I'm going to make a plug for starting. So, I recently listened to a podcast, and the host interviewed. Her name's Carrie Lorenz, and she was the first female F-14 Tomcat fighter pilot. So she's obviously a strong, successful woman, but her job was literally life or death. She talked about the terror of landing her fighter jet on an airstrip, a ship's airstrip late at night. So she would have bad weather, huge waves, complete blackness. So she said this sensory deprivation made it totally a terrifying experience, and one that she had to go in based on her training and her communication with her teams. She had nothing else to go off of often. And so she talked about this experience and how scary and how awful it was. And she said something that stuck with me for several weeks. She said, ironically, the only thing you can do to ever slightly mitigate the tension or the anxiety is to do it again. And I love that quote in general, but especially in the context of writing. I think it's overwhelming for a lot of people. We get bogged down in our own fears and in our own anxieties, and just how hard the process is. So, for me, I thought that was really inspirational. And I understand that writing is in no way life or death scenario. Most of us do it because we love it, and we would keep doing it even if we didn't make money off of it or gain success or fame, but it helps to have those goals to strive for, I think. Anyway, so NaNoWriMo is the perfect way to throw yourself into the writing lifestyle and give yourself a small amount of time with a light at the end of the tunnel. It's small and finite, and there's something tangible at the end to share for your efforts. So it takes courage to take the first step, and for many people, NaNoWriMo can be the first step. So I figured out NaNoWriMo is you're supposed to write 1,600 words a day, 1,667, right? So if you started tonight, you would have to write 2,000 words per day to be done by the end of November, which is still very doable. If you took tonight to think about it and started tomorrow, it would be 2,083 words. So it's still very doable. And I'm going to talk about I've kind of talked about why I think it's a good jumping off point for having the courage to write a book. And I want to talk a little bit about my experience with it, and then some keys for surviving and doing well instead of just kind of slogging and quitting halfway through, or losing steam or whatever. So my NaNoWriMo story is, back in the day, before I was a publisher, I was actually writing pretty consistently toward publication. And I had a master's degree, and I had focused my time on writing novels. I had written 6 or 7 full novels. By the time a lot of things happened in my life, and I just felt burned out, and I didn't write anymore. So it was about a 3-year period where I didn't write anything at all, not one word. And when I finally decided I was ready to start again, it was because of NaNoWriMo. It was me saying, well, this is coming up, everybody's talking about it, I might as well try it. So I did try it, and I actually liked it, and I actually wrote a whole book. And this book is what got me into pitch wars and got me an agent, and it did a lot of things for my confidence as a writer, and I learned a lot of skills in that short period of time. So I know it's a good way to motivate yourself to get back in the game, or to finish an idea that you've had for a long time and get going on that again. It's also, right now, let's be honest, who's tired of politics and all the sad things in the world right now? It's a great distraction from that. I feel like just having 1 month, especially right before the holidays, where you get lost in a story, is a great way to do something else and think about something else and fixate on something that's more healthy and going somewhere than obsessing over things that we can't control outside of our everyday lives and our own efforts. So also, as I've mentioned, if you've been putting it off, if you have this great idea and you've been putting it off, NaNoWriMo is the perfect way to kind of push yourself into that, because you have a whole community who's doing it. If you get on Twitter or anywhere, you'll see people talking about NaNoWriMo. They have a great website where you can go on and make friends and connections with people. It's a great way to meet critique partners. It's a great way to just be engaged in a community that will help motivate you, and probably I'm sure you can meet people who would be writing partners beyond the November structure. So those are some of the reasons I think that it's a good idea. There's a quote I found today that I like. I'm going to butcher his name. He was a Roman educator. His name's Marcus Fabius Quintilinus. I don't know. Sorry, Marcus. Sorry, Marcus, I butchered your name. But he said, write quickly and you will never write well. Write well and you will soon write quickly. And I 100% disagree with Marcus. I think it's an interesting premise, and I do think that the more you write, the more quickly it will come to you, and the more natural quick writing will become. But I think maybe having laptops or not writing with a quill and a bottle of ink or on tablets are a more effective way of doing it. And there's a lot of people who talk about successfully writing quickly. I think there's a fine line. Some people sacrifice quality, but it doesn't have to be that. And I like that NaNoWriMo just pushes you, because you don't have time to go back and perfect anything. It just pushes you forward, and then you can take a step back and polish your writing and worry about the quality. So I think quantity and quality still have to both be there, but NaNoWriMo allows you to get out of your own way and stop worrying about perfection and worry about the quality in December. So my first tip, I have five main tips and then two kind of little side notes. But my first one is schedule your time. I'm so surprised when people set aside November to write a book and then they don't make a plan for how they're going to write that book. So it's a stressful month anyway, but it will work out so much better if you're disciplined and put it on the calendar and know when it's coming each day. I feel like a lot of times for me, I don't write as much anymore, but for a lot of us who have creative pursuits, we feel like it's not as important as our job or our family or even housework, and so it never ever is a priority. So there's Joanna Penn is a New York Times bestselling author, and she's written I don't even know how many books, both fiction and nonfiction. But she has a quote that I really love. She says, schedule your writing time. Seriously, this could be a transformational step if you've not done this before. It's not complicated. Get on your calendar or your smartphone app or however you schedule your time and put in slots for writing. Then show up for that time to write, just as you would show up for a business meeting or a gym class or anything else that is time sensitive. Stop making your priority slot optional or showing up late as if it doesn't matter. I love that. How many of us are guilty of that? All of us, right? We put it as the last priority. And I think there are seasons for everything, times and seasons. But if we're saying November, NaNoWriMo is our priority is putting together a story, then we have to schedule that and make it a priority. And I think that there's a lot that we can learn from just simply scheduling it, and it will affect our writing even after NaNoWriMo. The second is to plan ahead. So we've talked about NaNoWriMo is all about fast writing and not necessarily quality writing. But there's a famous Anne Lamott quote that everyone throws around, and that talks about not letting perfection get in your way and being okay with a shitty first draft. And Lisa Crone, for those of you who haven't read Story Genius, I think Lisa Crone is a genius plotter, and she says, there's a massive difference between the shitty first draft of an actual story and a shitty first draft that randomly romps all over the damn place. So I think that's so brilliant. And I'm a big advocate of at least knowing your guideposts for your plot. And then you can leave the in-between stuff open for creativity and discovering your characters as you go. But especially when you're writing quickly, and a lot of if you're not used to writing 2,000 words a day, that's a lot. So if you're not used to doing that, then having a sense of where you're going will be huge. One plotting method that I personally love, I'll leave in the comments after, but it's by Dan Harmon. It's called people call it different things, but it's basically a circle. This is what I do. I use a paper plate. And again, I'll put the link in the comments, but he's the creator of Community and Rick and Morty. And so what he does is he does one of these story circles for each episode. So he says he does one for each episode, for each character, and for each season. And I love this because it's such a visual way to look at it. And he has different points, like the character starts in their zone of comfort, and then something happens. And they're just very simple plot points. But once you fill this out, it takes, I don't know how long it takes, not very long if you know kind of where you're going, and then it gives you the structure for your story as you go, and you're not left hanging as you try to figure it out. So I feel like if you have a basic premise, if you know what your character wants or needs and what motivates them throughout the story, and a general idea of the beginning, middle, and end, then you're ready to write in NaNoWriMo. And I would say even if you aren't a plotter and refuse to do any kind of planning, then at least when you stop for the day, write the next sentence for the next day, or make notes about where you're going next for your character. So when you open your computer, you're not staring at it blankly, wondering what you're doing next. You don't have to go back and reread what you've already written. You are just moving forward. So you have enough there that you can just move forward. And that will help a lot with keeping the pace and keeping the tempo and keeping the story alive in your mind. The third one is put yourself in the zone. So it's fun to read about different authors and their writing rituals. Stephen King writes at the same time every day. He takes his tea and his vitamins, and he closes his office door and writes at the same time. And just gets it out. Maya Angelou talked about getting a hotel room where she would go just to write. She never slept there. She would leave when she was done for the day, but she would go to her hotel room and her mind was triggered that it was time to write. There's a lot of these. Jack Kerouac would blow out a candle when he would light a candle to start writing and then blow it out when he was done. It's just a symbol to yourself that you're ready to start writing. And as your brain gets triggered by that, then it rewires you, and writing becomes, your creativity becomes a subconscious reaction to that instead of consciously having to force yourself to do that. A couple of other things are listening to music. I make playlists for writing, and I know a lot of people do. Or if you have Joanna Penn, who I talked about earlier, she always writes to thunderstorms. She just plays thunderstorms over and over in her book. She says she's done that for 20 years and she writes to that all the time. So having some kind of sound cue that you're going off of is a great idea. Smells, writing in the same place every time, writing at the same time every morning or whenever. Those are all good cues for your brain that you're ready to get to work. One of the things I love is power poses or specific movements. If you haven't watched Amy Cuddy's TED Talk about body language, I would recommend looking that up. It's really fascinating, but she does like a power pose that basically sends the energy out to the tips of your fingers and toes. And I'll do that before writing because it gets my energy level up. And another thing I'll share in the comments is for any of you who've watched Elementary with Lucy Liu, she has this weird little dance she does. It's not a dance, it's like a little exercise that she said she learned in med school to keep her awake at night. Obviously that's her character, but my husband and I started doing it based on that, and it's really fun how quickly it gets your energy up. So I'm going to put Lucy Liu in the comments too, and just something like that that's fun, that gets your energy up, that gets you excited about writing, and that tells your brain it's time to get to work will make a huge difference in being productive and not spending time staring at the screen and wondering where to go from here and how to get started. The other thing, number 4, that makes a huge difference is write in bursts. I feel like we think we have to have a couple hours at a time to sit and make any progress, but most of my good writing has been in increments of 20 minutes. That's my sweet spot. It's the amount of time that I like to write. 2 of my favorite books there's a million books about writing quickly. Some of them are better than others. My two favorites are The 8-Minute Writing Habit by Monica Leonelle and 5,000 words per hour by Chris Fox. And both of those have really great tips for just jumping in and being able to write a lot of words in a short amount of time. Because the longer amount of time you give yourself, more often you'll get distracted, you'll sit and play around on the internet. But if you know you only have to work for 20 minutes, it gives you a finite amount of time that you have to focus. And it's really actually fun and easy. So you set a timer and you can write down your word count with each 20-minute session and compete against yourself to make it better every time. You can do it with a friend for 20 minutes and compete with each other about who can get the most words in 20 minutes. But it gives you a little amount of time and then you take a break. So I would schedule, most of us, if we're doing 2,000 words per day for NaNoWriMo, it would only take us 3 or 4 20-minute sessions. So we're only talking about an hour and a half of our day instead of really feeling overwhelmed by the number of words you have to accomplish for NaNoWriMo. So just even those little bite-sized pieces are a huge help. It makes it so much less overwhelming. And I have a good friend who he has published with Disney. He puts out a ton of books. He's just really a genius writer. And he said, I think a lot of people could have a really great career on 500 words a day. And obviously we're talking about doing NaNoWriMo, which requires more than 500 words a day. But the principle is you don't have to write a ton or spend all your time and energy on writing to be successful and to be able to power through NaNoWriMo. So the last official one is number 5. Take the decision making out of it. Once you decide to do NaNoWriMo, commit to it. This goes along with scheduling and planning and putting yourself in the zone, but making the decision about when to write and what to write and where to write ahead of time will make a huge difference in you not burning out. I know a lot of us get halfway through the month, or we get toward the end and we're frustrated and we burn out. And if you make those decisions ahead of time, then you're not having to psych yourself up and convince yourself every single day to do this. So there's some really interesting news stories actually about, it's called decision fatigue. And they talk about prisoners of war and how once their body is worn down and beaten down and so stressed to a certain, mentally or physically, to a certain point, you're literally incapable of making decisions anymore. So you're not capable of fighting back anymore. So even outside of being a prisoner of war, obviously, there are some really interesting examples of successful people who have decided to take the decision making out of their day. Some of those include Mark Zuckerberg and Steve Jobs and Barack Obama. When you see them, they generally are wearing basically the same thing. Barack Obama, a little more variety now that he's not president anymore. But when he's president, he wore very similar things every day. So they're taking that decision off the table so they can use their brain power, which is finite, for more important things during the day. Another one is Ariana Huffington. She's been a hugely successful businesswoman, and she doesn't allow electronics into her bedroom. She knows that if her phone's by her bed, she'll play on it, she'll check her email, so she just doesn't bring it into her bedroom. That's not a decision she makes over and over again. She made it once, and she sticks to it. The other one I think is fascinating, whether you like him or not, is Mark Wahlberg. That he has a really specific schedule. He gets up at 2:30 every morning. He goes to bed at the same time. He has his prayer time. He has his workout time. He has his breakfast time. I think he has like 3 breakfasts, but if you get up at 2:30, I guess that's all you have to look forward to. Anyway, the point is they make these lifestyle choices ahead of time, and then they don't have to keep making them and wearing themselves down over and over by saying, well, am I going to write today or not? They just know they're doing the same thing every day. So none of these decisions, like Steve Jobs always wearing a black turtleneck, these aren't big, important things, but they require planning and they allow your mental energy to go to different places. So during writing in general and NaNoWriMo in particular, you'll already be mentally stressed and overwhelmed, but don't add to that by forcing yourself to decide every day what you're going to do and where you're going to write and if you should listen to music. Have that plan ahead of time, and it will make a huge difference in being able to stay sane and healthy and happy and have a big writing output. So my two little add-on tips are, one, do something every day to make yourself mentally or physically healthier, ideally both. But if you have more energy, drinking water is a huge one, taking a walk. If you have more energy, if you're healthier, you will be more productive every time. How many of us have been sick or depressed or stressed about the election, and it's hard to get out of that fog to produce creatively? But if we're doing something every day to be a little more mentally and physically healthy, then we will have the capacity to produce great books on a regular basis, but especially during NaNoWriMo. The final thing I want to say about that is, don't compare yourself to others. The writing world is hard, and there's always somebody who's more successful than you. There's always going to be somebody during NaNoWriMo who knocks out 5,000 words instead of 2,000. There's always going to be people who are doing things differently than you are. So don't worry about them. Just set your own goals and measure yourself against those and be proud of yourself. Don't worry about what anyone else is doing. Just like the landing a fighter jet in the dark of night with bad weather and an invisible landing strip and all of that. We can't control what will happen with our writing. We can't control if we're published. We can't control who we publish with. We can't control a lot of that, but we can control the ways we show up for our own writing. And that's the thing I love about NaNoWriMo, is it's a bunch of people with a dream who show up every day for that month to make it happen. So I hope a lot of you will do it. I think it's a lot of fun. I think it's a great way to feel energy in your creative life and know that a lot of other people are in the same boat as you when it gets hard. There's a book called Atomic Habits that I love by James Clear, and I would recommend it for everyone. He talks about how tiny incremental habits are a lot more important than huge life changes. And he says, maybe there are people who can achieve incredible successes overnight. I don't know any of them, and I'm certainly not one of them. The only way I made progress, the only choice I had, was to start small. So NaNoWriMo is the perfect opportunity to get started and start small, and I hope that you all accomplish great things. And I would honestly love to hear in the comments how many of you are participating in NaNoWriMo and what your tips are for surviving and thriving during this month. If you've done it in the past, if this is your first time, I would just love to hear all about it. And also, if you have any questions for me, I would be happy to answer them. I forgot to mention Carrie's in the comments, so hopefully she is interacting with you there. So let me know if you have any of your own thoughts about participating in NaNoWriMo. Okay. Okay, I hate that question. What are we talking about? Oh, I gave up decision making for Lent. Good job, Darby. That's awesome. Carrie, what are you saying? I hate that question. I don't. Candace and Darby, I would love to hear, do you guys ever do Rimo? Now that you're, not now, but since you're officially authors who write a lot, do you participate? Oh, is there a smaller version of Nano? Possibly one that includes pie. Yes, for that I would recommend writing on Thanksgiving for 5 minutes and reward yourself with a piece of pie and feel good about it. Candace or Shannon? Shannon, I think you were participating, right? How do you keep yourself psyched up? What do you do to participate in Nano? Anything you love about it? Okay, while you guys are writing, I'm going to include the links that I told you about. Okay, so this is the Lucy Liu exercise. I swear it's life-changing. Okay, it starts at minute 217. So I'll put that in. You can watch it later. Don't leave me right now. And then this is the blog. There's a bunch of articles, but this is one article that talks about the Dan Harmon story circle. And I am not a huge fan of Rick and Morty. I know some people love it. I am not one of those people. But I think that the method is genius, and I've used it several times, so I highly recommend it. And I did really love Community, and I think it's fascinating that he uses a different circle for each character within each episode, and one for each season. So that's a lot of story circles, but it's really cool because then you could put them all together on a bulletin board and have a really visual look at what you're trying to do. Okay, I'll be a nano rebel if anything. Right now, my self-care is not doing actual NaNoWriMo, and I think that's fabulous, Candace. Sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't, and I think that's great, and you produce a lot of books in other ways, so I think being a nano rebel is perfect. And Shannon says, don't think about it until it's time to write. That is also another approach. So I agree. I like the organic approach. I think for me, it's harder to get started if I don't know where I'm going. So I'll give myself a couple little sentences the day before, and then I don't have to think about it. I can just get in there and jump in. And I like to leave it organic too for filling out the story, just kind of knowing the main plot points. Anything else? Hopefully that was helpful. I guess if, sorry, Carrie. I guess if only one of you is even doing it, I'm super flattered that you showed up. Oh, Candace says, yes, that's why what's for dinner stresses me out every day. Yes, I feel like we don't really understand how much decision fatigue affects us. I had never even thought about it until I read a couple of books about willpower and grit and habits. But even just dinner time or fighting with our kids about everything, really. But just those little things that we have to use mental energy to figure out is exhausting. And our brain gets worn down, and it can only make so many decisions in a day. Darby, I use dialogue to get in the groove. That's amazing. That's a great way to do that. I like to use dialogue, and sometimes I'll read books that are similar, trying to get in the zone. Like I heard it from somebody who wrote like Victorian era romances, and she would read some of those to kind of get into the voice and that kind of thing. So I think dialogue is super fun. Okay, any other thoughts or questions? I feel like I've gone on and on, but thank you so much for being here. I hope it was helpful, even if you're not doing NaNoWriMo. Hopefully there's something that will help your writing later on. And you guys are amazing. And Shannon, I hope you'll keep us posted on how NaNoWriMo goes for you. I'm genuinely interested. And thank you all for coming tonight. It was so great to talk to you. And I wish you all the best for your NaNoWriMo writing or relaxing, either one you're doing. So have a good night. We'll see you next week.
Subscribe to our channel so you'll never miss an upload, or join us live every Thursday for author interviews, book clubs, writing advice, and more on Facebook at Owl Hollow Press, 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific. See you Thursday.